officially call the. Thank you. So before we officially call the meeting to order, we are having our city attorney look at a few things so we can make sure that we are in concurrence with how we are supposed to start the meeting and get everything underway. So if you give us a brief moment, we'll be right to it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, I know that it wasn't posted on the, yeah.
That's so nice.
Are we ready for recording or should we hold a little bit for Zoom? We're good to go. I want to be sure we're recording, so if we're up, we're good. Ivani, we good to go? Okay, solid. We would like to call this Brunswick City Commission regularly scheduled meeting for Wednesday, March 15, 2023 to order. We would first like to have an invocation, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Harris if you wouldn't mind. I know I just put you on the spot. If Commissioner Harris would bring us to the invocation, and before we have our Pledge of Allegiance, we're going to have Commissioner Roll introduce a young man who will come to lead us. Can we all stand?
Bow heads, please. Most heavenly and most gracious Father, Spirit of the one true and living God. Lord, we thank you now for these, our people that have gathered here. We thank you now for the leaders that you have appointed to be on this dais. We pray now, God, that we come together as a community, that we commune together and we make those decisions that are best for the entirety of the city of Brunswick. We pray now, God, that you will just lead us and guide us in our thought process, that you would cover us and keep us safe from all hurt, harm, and danger, seen and unseen. And so, Father God, as we go forth in this meeting, we ask that we all go forth in you. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And tonight, leading us with the Pledge of Allegiance will be Mr. Tanai Sullivan, who is a sixth grader at Glen Middle School and a city resident.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
We will now have the adoption of the March 15, 2023 regularly scheduled meeting minutes agenda. Do I have any changes? I think there is a need, if I'm correct, City Manager McDuffie, item number 8, consider approval of MOU with GIDA. According to our Economic Development Department and our city manager, there is no longer a need for that. Am I hearing that correctly?
That can be removed from the agenda. Thank you.
Wonderful. So if we could have somebody make that motion.
I make a motion that we eliminate item number 8 from the agenda. Consider approval of memorandum of understanding with the Golden Isles Development Authority regarding disbursement of commercial property enhancement grant.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
First and a second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the agenda is amended. We will now move to adopt the full agenda as amended.
So moved.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. We will now move into public comment period. Ms. Rhonda Waller to address the commission regarding 2307 Gloucester Street Plan Development by Port City Partners. Can you please come to the front if Ms. Waller is here? Yes, ma'am. Are you Miss? Yes, ma'am. You can come on up. If she has some comments, you can definitely read those and then we can move right into you number 2.
Sure, this is where she'll be reading from, but I'm
Yes, ma'am.
Victoria Mackey. I'm a resident of Urbana Perry Park. Let me get this right for Miss Rhonda Waller comments. It's 2307 Gloucester Street,
Yes, ma'am.
plan development by Port City Partners. The desired accomplishment is for the developers to meet with the Urbana Perry Park NPA to reduce the number of units, to reduce the number of floors. The desired accomplishment is for the DOT to conduct a traffic flow study of the area and the impact of a 5-story, 170-unit apartment development for Howard Coffin Park, Lanier Boulevard, Macon Avenue, Atlanta Avenue, G Street, Glen Avenue, Gloucester Street, Goodyear Avenue, Wilson Avenue, and Niles Avenue. That was Rhonda Waller.
Yes, ma'am. And also thank you to Ms. Waller and all of you all for sending in written comment as well. So we had it.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you. All right, mine. 2307 Gloucester Street Plan Development by Port City Partners. Desired accomplishment is for developers and the city commissioner to recognize the integrity of Urbana Perry Park. It's not erasure, but cohesive commitments and compassionate community engagement that advance the economic empowerment possibility with marginalized neighborhoods. We spoke before, Mayor, we were talking about the traffic flow and the flooding in our area that we have now. And the influx of traffic we had during the time of COVID. And when schools were closed, traffic was really heavy in there. The kids crossing the street to the park was just kind of nerve wracking on some days, with as fast as they go through our neighborhood, we were trying to get speed bumps or something to kind of slow the traffic down. That's just part of the, as a neighborhood, as one of the residents in that area, we're concerned about some of the streets really flood, and we're still concerned about that also. If they put those apartments there and not, have I guess you would say a retention pond or something to hold that water back, it's gonna come into the neighborhood, and of course, we're gonna have more flooding increasing. So I have Miss Anita Collins, and she's not here. No, okay, we're all with 2307 Gloucester Street Plan Development by Port City Partners. The desired accomplishment is for developers not to ignore the concerns of Urbana Perry Park NPA regarding the planned development density, height, insufficient parking, flooding, traffic problems. And again, we don't want our neighborhood destroyed, is what we were all concerned about. Okay.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming together. Hold on one second. I want to let you know, I think we have your email because you all sent it in directly.
Yes.
I've contacted, once I read those physical notes, I contacted the developer to have a conversation with them. I know you all said you have not spoken with the development team since kind of those initial conversations.
Yes.
I'm going to put you all on a conjoining email to make sure at you all's next MPA meeting, they send someone directly down there to talk about their thoughts on the plan's density and otherwise moving forward. So you all have that direct contact. So I just wanted you to know that's the first step we've taken, but we'll keep going down that road.
Thank you.
Of course.
The kids are not here. I guess I'll have to read theirs also. Do you mind?
No, not at
Okay,
all.
this is from another neighbor in Urbana Perry Park. And this is totally different. This is from Mr. William Kitts, and he said, our neighborhood has an overflow of establishments that sell alcoholic beverages. We are not suggesting that Brunswick should be dry, but we are emphasizing that we have too many in this neighborhood. Desired accomplishment is for the city commission to examine the data that we presented regarding the salutation of the existing community opportunities in our neighborhood for the sale of alcoholic beverages and heed our request that enough is enough. That's from Mr. Kitts. The next one is from Bonetta Kitts. The desired outcome is to think about what you want your neighborhood to look like and honor our request to forego allowing the sale of alcoholic beverages at liquor stores, convenience stores, and like businesses in our Urbana Perry Park neighborhood.
I want to thank them as well for sending their comments over. Just so you all know, and we've tried to say it before, we've probably been one of the toughest commissions on alcohol licenses coming forward before us. And that's because during our administration, once we started, we wanted to make sure that every single alcohol license that was approved in the city had a physical meeting with the MPA. And while a lot of people push back, a lot of those guys push back against that, it opened up the voice for you all to have in the process. So we know exactly what we know now, which is there are some areas where there's absolutely too many of those establishments. And when they come before us, we will fully take that into consideration when approving or not allowing those to move forward. So I want to say thank you for you all's involvement in that as we continue on down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I want to take a moment of personal privilege. And I'm not sure how he feels about it, but I want to welcome Mr. Milburn to our city commission meeting. He has not only been a standard bearer for our downtown business community for quite a long time, but he was also my next door neighbor. He's my church's next door neighbor. He was my next door neighbor in my campaign office. And I think his attack has reverberated throughout our community. So I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for lending your voice, and thank you for having the conversations that you and I have had. And I just wanted to recognize you. With that, we will be moving into some expert testimony regarding nuanced properties. Before we get into this discussion, I want to, on the onset, describe the framework of what we will be doing over the next 3 city commission meetings. We will be having expert testimony whom we call as a commission to have direct questions from us answered so that we can gather facts that we need to make the decisions that we need to make and the policy changes that we need to make to ensure that we start to curb nuanced properties throughout our city. The first conversation and the first group of people that we've called is not only our chief of police who deals with these properties on a day-to-day basis and those who inhabit those properties, those who are affected by those properties, but also Pastor Englehart, who is the pastor of First Bryant Baptist Church, which is right on the corner by many of you all's community's establishment. It is right down the street from here, but also an establishment that directly deals with some of the ramifications of nuanced properties that surround their downtown footprint. That being said, we understand that there are a lot of individuals and citizens who want to provide their outlook and what they feel on this issue. What we want to do is the same process by which Ms. Mackey and others signed up. We would want you all to go through that normal sign-up process where Ms. Atkinson will put your name on the agenda. We'll allot a certain amount of time at the beginning to hear those feelings and to hear that testimony. What we would say to that testimony is I think as best we have tried to do is encapsulate some issues that we have coming out of the nuanced property issue. So we would ask, hopefully, if you come up and you speak, that while you lend your personal testimony, that you also lend some things that you think might help, some things that we could look into, some proper policy veins that we could take a look at, and we will be happy to do so. So we wanted to make sure that you all knew what that exact sign-up process is, so you can have your voice be heard in that particular space. With that, we will now call forward Chief Jones of our Brunswick Police Department and Reverend and Pastor Englehart. And this is in regards to nuisance properties. You can sit right here. Yes, ma'am. That's how. First off, I want to thank both of you all for giving us some of your time. Thank both of you all for the work that you've put in on the information that you've given us. I know we've had several conversations about some of the things that you all have been dealing with in this process. I've talked to each of the commissioners that you be coming forward to give not only experiential testimony from Pastor Englehart, but also direct facts that we have to digest and understand about the strain on our safety force from nuanced properties and calls to the such. Because of that, I want to start with Pastor Englehart. If I can, we want to just, number one, if we can open up, just know a little bit about you, how you came to First Bryant and how long you've been serving as the shepherd of that flock. Somebody's coming to you right now.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. I have been assigned as the pastor to the congregation at the First Bryant Baptist Church now for about a year. Prior to my installation as pastor, I was part-time filling in for about a year. Prior to that, I was the pastor out on St. Simon's Island at the First African Baptist Church for about 10 years.
I know you operate in an interesting footprint in our city. I think you have nuanced properties as we will try and define it. And you probably deal with some of the ramifications from having those properties kind of surround your footprint downtown. And I think you probably have some issues maybe not only to one side of you, but also some issues kind of down certain corridors in different areas. So I just want you to, as best you can, experientially describe some of the things that you and your congregation may have to go through in dealing with those nuanced properties that surround your area.
Yes, sir. Our congregation had to deal with multiple incidents of loitering and camping out on the porch, on the steps, under the carport, and the perimeter of the property. Our van tags were stolen at least twice before the deacons decided to take the new tags, and keep them inside the vehicle, locked away. Cars have been parked and or abandoned in the parking lot. Many times when we come to worship on Sunday morning, there's a car that's sitting there in the parking lot and has been there sometimes for 2 or 3 days. We've had on occasion to have those cars removed, sometimes speaking to the persons on the street to ask if the owner of the car is there, if they will remove it. You get various responses, sometimes fairly hostile, but so far no one has launched an attack against any of the deacons attempting to get them to comply. We have had to remove persons or have them removed from the steps. I mean, if you're familiar with that property, there are some tall steps on the front of the church. And the steps have been roped off for the last year or so to discourage sexual activity on the porch and overnight trespassing. I don't know that it has been all that successful. Deacons have had to check for and clean up trash, including blankets and clothing left behind, human feces, beer and liquor containers under the carport. I personally came over one Saturday morning and had to call the deacons to come over with a pressure washer to clean up the carport. Flower pots, concrete flower pots now sit beside our door under the carport. They are bolted down to prevent theft. I intended to put some flowers there. I was discouraged because when they have placed flowers out, they informed me that not only were the flowers taken, but the pots that were there, which is why they're now bolted down. Because the pots are, there are no flowers in the pots, there are some roots from what used to be flowers there. Those pots are now regularly used as urinals. Fighting assaults and drug overdosing means frequent police calls to our address at the corner of F and Wolf Streets. We have been blessed, we are blessed to have a deacon who is a police officer. And he let me know that anytime he hears 1100 F Street, he comes, does the best he can to get there and figure out what's going on, because that is our property. Out of concerns for security, our officers and our leaders are reluctant to schedule late evening gatherings for worship and other programs. Nevertheless, those who sleep in the shadow of our steeple are invited to worship with us, and from time to time they do. They are welcome. We share our food with them, and anytime we have activities, if food is left over, we take it and make sure that it is dispersed among them. We support financially those entities which attempt to help the homeless, those who are down on their luck and whatever. And we also provide clothing, because we believe that we have a responsibility to care for people as much as possible, despite the fact that the property is not respected and My understanding from my deacon is that there are times when they are even at the point of being assaulted, weapons brought out when they attempt to remove them.
Pastor, I want to say thank you for that opening testimony and giving us really a rundown of some of the things that not only have affected you personally, but your congregation. And I want to say thank you. I've been to your church and been able to worship with you all, but also know that you all have done a block party for the area. And your church gives back to the area. So your church is directly involved in service to all mankind. And so I want to say thank you for that. I want to open it up to questions from the commission that you would have for the pastor about her experiences, her congregation's experiences, or any additional information that you need to learn. Pastor, I want to say thank you for your testimony. Thank you for coming to let us know what you're dealing with on the day-to-day. And I also want to say thank you even more so because your church has handled these issues. And I don't know about anybody else on the DIOS, but we haven't received a call from you, and you do it in love, and you're trying to make a difference in the way that you can. So thank you for coming to talk to us about what's affecting you. Chief, we'll now move to you. And I know you have some base facts that you want to go through up front. And so we'll open it up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I presented a summary to you and the commissioners and Ms. McDuffie of some information that you and I discussed last week as far as hot spots in the city, the biggest problems in the city. So if you've had a chance to look at that, I hope that you'll notice the square box at the top. When we pull calls for service, looking for homeless involvement, indigent involvement, vagrants, that's not the way people usually call in and say there's a problem. If someone calls 911 or the non-emergency number for a police officer to respond, they will call and say there's a lady in the street shouting obscenities. Or they will say there is someone begging for money at the corner of Gloucester and 17, or there's a fight, or there's someone unconscious. So I want to clarify that up front, that most calls that come in are not classified as homeless or vagrants. I'll reference back to that in just a minute in the packet that I gave you. But on the front page there at the bottom, you'll look at the vagrancy nature, and that was 264 calls for service last year. And this year so far, 36. Now, as I said, just most people don't say vagrant when they call in, okay? But that's one that the word vagrant comes up somewhere in the narrative of the police report. That's 264 times. So if you look at the second page, like you and I discussed, some problem areas within the city of homeless and places that we constantly respond to. Mary Ross Park surprised me. Last year, there was 299 calls at Mary Ross Park. Year to date for this year, 43. A lot of those at nighttime, those that leave the well or the homeless throughout the city will go look for a place to sleep. And Mary Ross Park has become a prominent place for them to go. I work patrol. Sometimes our patrol officers every night, some shifts will go a couple of times a night just to keep the people run out of there. And I say run out, it's not to be heartless, but there's trash, there's supplies that they leave behind. The bathrooms, the city bathrooms, it is a city park, have been destroyed, messed up many times. So we try to keep a watch out. And Matthew Hill, our downtown development authority director, when they have things scheduled at Mary Ross Park, he'll send an email, and it's a common tag at the bottom now. Please have officers ride through Mary Ross Park before this event starts to clear out the homeless. So like I said, that number shocked me a little bit, 299 calls last year. The well, we just have discussed that on numerous times. Last year, calls for service for the police department was 524 calls. This year to date, there was 123. And I have just a little bit of reference for you on that to give you an idea. over the past few years on calls for service. In 2019, there were 312 calls for service at the well. 2020, there was 249 calls for service. 2021, there was 375 calls for service. 2022, there was 457 calls for service for police at the well. And I calculated those numbers up. That is over 2% of our calls for service are at the well. 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you calculate that into over 34,000 calls of service a year, 2% is a pretty big number there. Our most common calls for service at the well were a problem with person, suspicious persons, fights, trespassing, and drugs. The Manor House is not, they have a congregation, of course, during the lunch hour where they feed the homeless. So there's a congregation of homeless people there. We had 48 calls for service there last year, and year to date for 2023, 21 calls for service. And while we're talking about the Manor House, like I said initially, most calls don't come in as homeless problem or vagrant problem. But I kept thinking about that and looking at the Manor House, what I ask our crime analysts to do, if you'll flip over to your back page, it's a map. And it shows just basically a block radius in each direction of the Manor House calls for service. This is from October of 2022 to March of 23. So what's that, 6 months, 5.5 months roughly? Calls just in that area, 156 incidents. There were robberies, sex crimes, 77 listed as other, simple assaults, suspicious, 30 calls for service were suspicious. Assault 7, family offenses 3, larcenies 4. So that just gives you an idea. Like I said, it's hard to, and I'm not putting the responsibility on the Manor House. Don't take me wrong. They provide a service. But as I was thinking of the areas in town, they all don't occur at one specific location after the Manor House is through feeding. The people disperse out around the area. After the well finishes their services at 5 o'clock, people disperse out around the area. So this map on the back gives you sort of a snapshot of what goes on in that immediate area in that neighborhood during and also after those services are provided. And that includes, if you notice on the map, Mr. Mayor, you and I discussed the 3 abandoned houses there. Those are indicated on the map there, and are quite a bit of instances in those abandoned houses. Yes, sir. So moving on, just for reference, other places that we discussed, Salvation Army, that is on your list also. We had 52 calls for service last year, only 4 to date this year. Surprisingly, we get very few calls. They handle the Salvation Army, the folks that work there, very, very well. And they try to handle their problems before it becomes our problem most of the time. So very proud of them for that. Blythe Square, last year, that was a big issue. And we had recommended several times about the benches being taken out of the park, and the city finally took those out. There were 70 incidents there last year. And believe it or not, Blythe Square we no longer have very much of a problem with homeless in Blythe Square. Taking those benches out made a huge difference. But they would leave the well in the evening time after 5 o'clock, go across to Blythe Square and camp out for the night. And I've been to calls, many calls there, working patrol. One, the end of last year was an overdose there. And we had to give the lady Narcan, 2 shots of Narcan just to revive her. I've got some info for you on drug cases around that area also in just a minute.
And we also had that fire.
Yes, ma'am. The fire at the church. Absolutely. The electrical room building back there was burned up. We actually had a call this week. What's today, Wednesday? It was Monday, I think, of an abandoned house. And the 911 call came out, officers got there, and there was a homeless person in the abandoned house with a fire in a buggy. That was this week. But yes, ma'am, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of property damage caused over the the last few years in public squares and private and churches, just like she was talking about just a minute ago, other locations. The third page that you have, calls for service at City Hall were 43. The highest of those was suspicious persons, problem with person was the second, and vagrancy was the third. They'll camp out in front of the building there on the side of the building at night. They like to plug in their electronics to the outlets there. And they will sleep in the park on the steps and on the benches at night. So that was 43 calls for service last year, only 16 year to date for this year. Hello, goodbye. I received a call from Alan Younger. I've known Alan for years. I used to, before I was a police officer, I used to work at the hospital, and he and I worked together many, many moons ago. But he's on the board at Hello, Goodbye. So, and they were having problems with homeless coming in and threatening the employees and causing a disturbance. Surprisingly, at Hello, Goodbye, there were 37 calls for service there last year, 7 year to date this year. And so we talked at length about the problems there. He asked for some ideas how to deal with the homeless when they become an issue, and people with mental issues also that come in. So I gave him a couple ideas, but I encouraged him to come tonight and some from the congregation so y'all could hear not just from me, but from the folks that deal with them every day in the community. Jekyll Square, there were only 11 instances there, 3 to date this year. But if you look down at the bottom of the page, overdoses, there's a lot of drug use, there's a lot of prostitution, particularly around the well area. And that's one of the biggest issues that we were having at Blythe Square was prostitution. They would go over there when it was dark at night, and they would be either pimping out or prostituting and using drugs on a daily basis there. So that was a really big issue. It still is. The biggest problem now is fentanyl is laced with everything. We have some fentanyl test kits, I believe now, so we can test. But the one I mentioned to you a minute ago in the square there, the lady that had overdosed, we gave her 2 Narcan shots. Her boyfriend was there, and we kept asking, what did she take? What did she take? Well, he finally told us all she did was smoke a marijuana blunt. Guess what the marijuana blunt was laced with? Fentanyl. Where did she get it? Across at the well. But that occurs a lot. Some totals there. Calls for service labeled overdose last year was 41. This year to date is 7. The drugs, the fentanyl, heroin laced with fentanyl, other unknown drugs. There was a homeless lady, and I was working graveyard shift that night. It was down right off of Gloucester Street. There's some apartments there. I won't name them. But her mother had come and found her overdosed. And the officers on the shift tried to work her, gave her fentanyl, but she was too far gone. So she died right there in front of us on the street. That was end of last year. So in the downtown area, I asked Paige, our crime analyst, to look at that. Drug and alcohol offenses within the past 6 months, just in the downtown area, based around sort of the circle, like the little map that I showed you for the Manor House. There's been 20 incidents so far. Drug overdose, drugs, controlled substance problem, drugs, overdose, drugs, controlled substance problem. It's just on and on and on. There are some DUIs, some alcohol there too. But that's downtown area right here around Gloucester Street and Norwich, 20 instances in the last 6 months. So that's a lot of numbers. I like numbers. Numbers show a true picture if people take the time to look at them. But the real picture is on the street when, like this young lady here deals with the homeless every day, her congregation, hello, goodbye, when they're in the store. I got cussed out last Thursday, I think it was, on North Street there's a female that has mental issues. She's homeless. That's probably her 3rd or 4th time cussing me out. We get constant calls on her. But the reality of it is, for the residents, the business owners in the downtown area, the visitors, it is a daily occurrence sometimes for some of the people that live down here. The young man that got stabbed in the neck, I went to that call. homeless man, caught him 2 blocks away. A known homeless man. It just gets tiring for everyone. And I'm not putting blame on any location, on any group of people, or especially not the folks that try to help the homeless. But they are dropped off here all the time. The lady I just told you about that cussed me out last week on Norwich Street, she had made her way to Norwich. Me and an officer was talking just by chance today. The police up there, I'm ashamed to say this, brought her back to Brunswick yesterday and dropped her off because they didn't want to deal with her. Camden County brings them up. There was a lady end of last year that I dealt with at the well on North Street. She was dropped off in a wheelchair, an electric wheelchair that did not run. She had surgery. She had a lot of medical issues with her legs. Camden County brought her up and dropped her off. I'm ashamed to say that, but the services that are here attracts homeless. And it's the more services that are offered, the more that it attracts. I'm not saying I'm against any of those services being offered. We help our fellow brothers. But the folks that live in this area, work in this area, and the officers too, I'll speak for the officers. Everyone's just tired. So we have to have a different way of looking at this. I appreciate you listening to me. Any questions I can answer, I'm happy to.
Chief, I want to first off, thank you for the work you and your department have put into to put numbers to feelings, but to make sure that we have the facts to know where the hot spots are, where's some areas that we need to look at. And I also just want to thank you for your service and you and your officers. I want to open it up for questions from the commission before I dive in, you guys.
Well, I have a question. How can we as citizens and people who love and care about our community be more effective in alerting the police and others to something that's going on? I mean, is it always picking up the phone? Are there certain numbers we should call? Are there certain ways we should report something? What would better facilitate action that could be taken?
The key to that, ma'am, is the sooner the better. A lot of folks will wait. They'll see something that looks a little hinky and they'll be like, okay, I'm going to look, I'm going to watch, but I don't want to get involved until something gets out of hand a lot of times. Then they will make the call. If you see something that looks hinky or suspicious, women's intuition, the gut instinct, go ahead and call us. It can help keep from escalating something getting out of hand. So anything that looks or makes you feel uneasy, go ahead and call us. Let us know. We had some robberies this past weekend. The county had some also. We apprehended those suspects yesterday. They weren't homeless, but they were lurking, the suspects, lurking and waiting and watching. If you see something out of place, you get that little gut instinct, go ahead and call the police. It could help prevent. And citizens also helped us make that arrest too, or gave us the information.
Saw a fellow today on Newcastle heading out of town, and I couldn't tell if he was by himself or not, but he had probably 3 grocery carts in tow piled high that he was trying to navigate down the street, and he was checking chain link fences as he went. Is that something you would call in if you were to see that and say, that's a vagrant, that's a homeless person? Is it a suspicious person? How do you tag that?
Suspicion would be the key word there, ma'am. Being homeless is not a crime.
Sure.
So if they're walking and moving, okay, that's okay. There's nothing we can do. Something suspicious. If I'm not saying setting up camp is suspicious, but you know what I'm saying. If they're putting their bedding out on somebody's porch and you know that's somebody's residence or business, go ahead and call us. That's something to call about. We can move them on. Maybe screaming at people or cursing at people in the street. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead and call us. That's something that we can help control and get hopefully the people calm down and move on. So it's that gut instinct again. If somebody's just walking down the street, and the difference in, okay, they're peeking in the car windows or they're looking in business windows at night, something like that.
Thank you.
I've got one I'd like to ask you about. And I want to say thank you both for being here and being with us and helping us with this situation. But you remember the lady that had the shopping cart that we wound up finding her in the woods behind the Chinese restaurant on Highway 17?
Yes,
All right, she first evolved downtown at a shopping cart. She wound up for several days out on the St. Simon's Causeway. And then she wound up coming back down 17 and spending several days on the corner of 17 and Parkwood. And then we found her cart and I called Chief behind the Chinese restaurant. And you went out there. You found that she was out there. Whatever happened to that? It was a young lady, if I remember correctly.
yes, sir. I called, it was either Garrow or Rick, and they come out and cleaned up all the property and trash and everything else that she had left behind New China. She is not staying there anymore, sir. Where she's at, I don't know.
So you haven't seen her again.
No, sir.
And I mean, this was over a 2-week period, I guess. She was out on St. Simon's Causeway. And I haven't seen her anymore. I just, all of her stuff was there right in the woods that we'd seen on the causeway. We'd seen all along her way for a couple of week period.
Yes,
And she just disappeared. And that's the problem because you're concerned. That's what this is all about. It is about concern. We're concerned for the people that need help and we want to see them get help. We really do. And I think it's the consensus of our commission and our mayor up here to go through this thing and try to make the process fair for the people that are sitting out there. And I know when you're out on the corner and you're laid out, and it's 100 degrees, that there you need help. And you're not behind the bush, you're not hiding, you're out there in the public. You're screaming to me that you need help. And I think that's what we hope to achieve here and to attain is that we get all these people the help that they're screaming for. And it just tears me up to come by Safe Harbor where kids are there. They're on the other side of that fence out there. What kind of life experiences are those kids having out there? They're not what I want for mine. So we need to find those people the help that they need. It's here in this community, I believe. I want to commend Wright Culpepper for what he's done there. I really do. But we've got to find an answer to the public situations that we're all here to talk about tonight. And I appreciate the opportunity to be involved with it and hope that we can get to the bottom and help all the people that need the help. Thank you.
I have a question and it's a question for the entirety that's in the room. How many of you want to be subjected to the frequent visits by uninvited guests? How many? That's a question for everybody in the room. How many of you, and everybody is a you in this room on tonight, how many of you want to be visited by uninvited guests frequently? Frequently. How many of you? I don't. We not gonna, we don't want just to cause any other confusion or anything, but that's a question that everyone in the room needs to be able to answer. When you go home or when you go to your business, unless it is a business that's a public business and you are scheduling appointments or you're having people to come in as walk-in service, nobody wants their privacy invaded. Nobody wants their business that they have invested in being visited by invited guests. Nobody wants their property that they've invested in to depreciate because people are not taking care of it, because people are not respecting their property. Nobody wants that. Nobody in this room or on this dais is heartless. Nobody in here does not feel the compassion that we want to help those that may have fallen on bad times. Everybody has a heart up here. Everybody in this room has a heart. People are going to come where the services are offered. My question is, why does all the services have to be offered in the city? Everybody, this is a question again. If you feel good about the services you're providing and the safety thereof, put them in your neighborhood or your community. And please, y'all, the applause are good, but we don't want it, because I don't want to cause any other. I'm just speaking facts from my seat. If you feel so good about what you're doing, and questions have been asked, when you go home at 5 o'clock, how many of these uninvited guests are invited to your house? How many of them are setting up at your businesses elsewhere? How much are you having to confront after you close down? The day services, the night service, whatever the intermediate, interim, whatever it is, has ceased for the day. How many of you are taking them further and away from people's businesses that you've heard? This isn't a problem that just started. This isn't the first time we've been at this point. We've been here many times. We've been here many times, and we've asked the same questions over and over again. I look at the problem, and if you look at the numbers and do it over a monthly basis, we've done we've done, and we are still working to support our law enforcement. But services, people are going to go where the services are. We've had conversations before I ever even became a commissioner, and I was on a homeless committee. And we had conversations about where best would serve these facilities to be put. Where we talked about out in the county, and I'm not advocating for you just placing services anywhere, but I'm advocating to put them in an area that they would best be served on a holistic basis. We've got spot servicing. So when you leave one, you go into another one, you go in here, you go in there. And the approach that we're taking is not a holistic approach. We've got to be more concerted. And you all may get mad at me for this statement, but the city can't solve all of it. And everybody is looking at the city to be the solver of this homeless problem, which is a national problem. But we need everybody in here on the same page. When people go and set up these services, they don't come and talk to the city about what they're doing. They go ahead on to do it. And then the city has to deal with the fallout from the backside of it. I'm not just pulling the well out, I'm pulling whoever out who's doing it. But because the well is on a main thoroughfare for the city, why would you put that there? That's just my question. That's the question I've had from day one. We can't stop people from purchasing properties, but there should have been a conversation held with the city officials before that facility was put there. With who? It wasn't held with us. No, ma'am, it was not. The conversation was not held with us. That's the misconception and the misinformation that gets out in the community. I don't think there are any of you that are here
But it was saying, somebody call would be part of that, that's not happening.
Yeah, I don't, okay, I would say, I don't recall that conversation. When it was done, when I became, it was done. But we've been working and trying to work with the facility and other facilities. But again, there are others, I'm sure, that want to say something. But if you feel so good about what you're doing, is it something that you would live in? Is it something that you would take to your community? Is it something that you would feel comfortable about being? Because I look at everybody here. How many live in downtown and how many have businesses downtown? I think that kind of speaks for itself. If you feel good about what you're doing and feel good enough about when you leave it, that it's going to be safe for the community that it's in, that you're not going to leave a problem behind, and it's not going to be a consistent and persistent problem. Services, the people are going to come. Why do they all have to be in the city? That's what we need to find out. That's what we need to work on. We have everybody. We're not the fix all for all of this. We need people like you that come bring the solution. We have experts in here. When you're saying that there's a problem going on at a facility, then you need to address that facility. We're asked to provide security for everything. Our police force, they go out and do the best that they can to be protectors of all of the assets for the city. But some of the problems are not being brought by just those things. They're coming from outside interferences and stuff. But we are trying to galvanize these things and bring these things into a centralized, controlled perspective so that we can start to moving and doing something about it. We have people coming and saying, you all need to do this, y'all got to do this, but the city can't fix everything. We can work with other organizations that specialize in these areas to help us to bring a solution to it. They had the homeless summit. They've got committees that's working on these different things. But the city officials, we're not the fix all to all of this stuff. This is a community problem. This isn't just the DIOS's problem. This is a community problem. This is a national problem. And we're trying to find solutions that's going to fix what we can here locally anyway. And so if you have a solution, bring it to us.
Hold on one second. Hold on. We want to not go back and forth between the crowd.
If you have a solution, we just ask you, join us in the committees and whatever, if you specialize in it, help us to bring a solution to. We can't, we're not just taking, questions. The mayor's gonna move us in this process.
What came out of that as possible step one?
But I understand we have questions, but we have to stay inside the bounds of a meeting. I would never interact with back and forth, and not back and forth in a bad way, but a conversation when we are inside of a solid meeting setting. So we've been called to order. We got to stay inside of that order. And so the questions will be put forward to those who we've called to testify. But for those of you who truly do have an opinion, I promise you, Devani will get you signed up for the first, and we'll have that mic wide open because we want to hear that exchange of ideas. Pastor Engelhardt.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question. I agree that solutions are difficult to come by. As we pass by leaving Gloucester and turning there on F Street to Wolf, I think it is, to get to the church. On Sunday mornings, I see people with suitcases, not just the folks who have been there, but these people look like they just got off a bus or a van. They have been dropped off. And I heard the police chief allude to that. And I have been told that persons are brought from as far away as Jacksonville, Camden County, and for McIntosh, further north and whatever. I would encourage in your search for solutions to look at how can we deal with that. We have a local problem that is exacerbated by others being brought to this area. And I don't know what is being done to stop that, if anything can be done. The second is a concern, and again, it's no solution, but a concern. When we concentrate, if we're looking at services and you concentrate all of the services in one place and you concentrate the persons that you're attempting to serve in that area, you are going to have, I suspect you're going to have a greater problem because you've got all these folks concentrated in one place. You're going to have, and not only an abundance of services, but security and all kinds of things, because many of these persons are not just homeless. Many are not just dealing with addiction issues, but you have mental problems abounding. And when you put all three of those in a concentrated area, you're probably going to end up with a bigger problem. And, something else just for you to think about.
Thank you, Pastor. I want to run down a couple questions, Chief, and again, thank you for the information that you put together. One side of the questioning is probably more towards nuisance properties. The other side of the question is maybe about if we can change anything in the way we do law enforcement or do safety to do better to track or to keep up with those who are repeat offenders, if you will. So the first one is as we try to think about what it means to have a nuanced property. When you say 2% of calls, I know you probably don't have a number, but what does that equal as far as I think dollar amount of time spent in a single location when you're talking about just the resources that we have with officers, with the continued work that we do to try and have recruitment come to our area and additional officers come to our area. We have to imagine that 2% also equals an actual dollar amount that's being spent kind of in singular locations, whether not just the 2% for the location that you talked about, but also, whether it's the abandoned homes right there by Manor House or anything like that. Is there any way to kind of quantify that to a dollar number?
That's a tough one, sir. I guess we could come up with some type of very round figure.
Okay.
We could look at our salaries for officers for the year combined.
Okay.
What you pay in budget for our department.
Right.
I guess divided by the number of calls, divided by 2% of those calls at one location.
Okay.
Of course, there'd be huge variables in there. Some calls may take 10 minutes, some calls may take 2 hours. It's according to what the call is.
Okay, no problem. Hey, the other questions that I want to ask is that I don't want to just focus on a particular, space in downtown. I also know that we would have what other people in the community call nuisance properties inside of College Park, inside of Magnolia Park, inside of the downtown core, because those are the homes that have been abandoned. There's no one in those homes, so they become spaces for squatters. So even if you're leaving Salvation Army, what have you, even if you're leaving those places, you kind of have those homes that are insular to the community that they kind of know to go to, whether it's, and it's not just those who are indigent. It could be young kids who staying out too late, whatever it is, those become those properties that receive a lot of calls, as well as the calls to I got, my neighbor has 15 cars in his yard and plays the music too loud, I think about the whole scope of those. Is there a way to identify those homes that are insular to other communities that may be having issues as well, whether it's amount of calls to a certain residential property or an amount of calls to a certain residential area? I know the heat map definitely helps.
Yes, sir. Looking at individual properties, it is easier to focus on and pull calls for that property, like the ones we discussed by the Manor House.
Right.
It's very easy to pull the number of calls to those locations and show what goes on there. As a whole, if you're looking for a number for the whole city, that's going to be a little bit tougher. What we could do is look at the Public Works has a list that they work on along with the city manager and Brian Corey for having those houses torn down.
Okay.
Abandoned properties, abandoned houses.
Because that was going to be my follow-up question, just in your official opinion, the best way to handle that issue would be to tear the
down.
structure down
Yes,
to
sir,
make sure you're
absolutely.
clearing the lot.
And rehabilitate
Yeah,
that property,
okay,
the lot, put something new on it,
yeah.
something viable, worthwhile.
But if we
beneficial.
can't get in touch with that homeowner, sometimes it's, 15 different, split ways. The best thing for it not to be a structure though. So the additional dollars put into demolition, or that we have put in a demo, but adding additional dollars to demolition for those properties would provide a better space than just leaving the property as is.
Absolutely. And to go a little further on that, I see a road that you're going down here, I think, is something that we had discussed before. I'd suggested that we have sheets of plywood, board up those houses. The city do it if the property owners won't, because it is a nuisance property. We'd had a discussion on that, and then maybe that's something we can revisit. But if it is considered a nuisance property, why not?
Yeah. Brian, do you remember that discussion at all?
Yes, I do. We have attempted to, on certain vacant properties, abandoned properties, we have attempted to fast track what would be a municipal action to allow the city to go and secure or clear the property, meaning removing the junk, trash, and vegetation. There is a noticeable issue, legal issue that would arise if it's a vacant structure that's being utilized in any of the manners that the chief put forward. That's an heirs property, where John Hunter and I would look and see the, title search alone could cost. There's just not money in the budget to go after a property in that nature. I know that John and David Bravo have had good success using some of those funds from CDGB to demolish some of these properties. That's typically working in concert with a homeowner, or if we can find an heir that's ascertainable and will communicate with us, we can usually work through that process quicker. But the long form of that is title search, finding all interested parties. There's often tax deeds on these properties that also have to be taken care of. And then upon doing all of that, then it needs to follow through the legal process. Once we get it to that step and filed in municipal court, it's relatively quick, but the parts leading up to it can be sometimes onerous.
And is that the same process or two different lanes of processes for boarding it up and the demo?
So both, part of the process of demolition is that state law allows the city to place liens on the property if we've complied with all of the processes leading up to the demolition. So to fast track on certain properties that are vacant or overrun with trash, junk, weeds, whatever it might be, we've done a faster process that forgoes the lien, but in doing so, we can't demo. There's not, the city can't put the money into demoing, foregoing lien. We can clear the property for public safety, health, those types of issues. But securing, unfortunately, falls within that law that governs demolitions as well. So if we were to go in and try to secure it, which we've done, if the determination by the building inspector or code enforcement says, hey, we think this structure has the potential to rehab or is sound structurally, we have also gone that route to go in and board it up, lock the doors and try to secure it in that manner.
Perfect. Thank you. Chief, the other line of question I think has come from a lot of what we heard, and I think Pastor Engelhardt, encapsulated it well. That we have heard consistent stories of whether it's one by one or vans or whatnot of people dropping individuals off into our community. There's a couple lines of questioning I want to go on that. The first one is when you all run into that issue, when we've locked in that somebody has been dropped off by a neighboring county or another municipality. We have on good record that they maybe are not from this community, and I'm not trying to say they're trying to return home or figure out what they're trying to do. Is there any communication between safety forces that we have someone in our community, they state that you all have dropped them off here? We need to A, ascertain if that is true, B, figure out some next steps of how we handle those issues.
Yes, sir. I have mentioned to the sheriff in Camden before, actually, with the lady I mentioned to you in the wheelchair that had medical issues. They're going to fly stealth up here and fly stealth back, dropping them off. That means they're not going to admit to it. But yes, I have addressed that before.
Okay. Does it help at all if we have communities where you have it on good stead and you feel good faith about the information that we've gotten, that the elected officials need to communicate directly with elected officials about processes that may be going on, whether it's county or city that are contiguous to us?
Certainly couldn't hurt.
Yes, sir. The last piece of questions that I had is I had a chance to talk with Mr. Milburn and his wife over the past couple weeks, and some of the things that they said are of interest to me. Number one, Miss Milburn was obviously a little bit distraught, but also it worried her that she felt that a lot of this seemed to emanate out of the area that the well occupies or the well directly. I want to just ask a base question, not only for the calls that you get directly to the well, but if you were to do a heat map, almost like you did for Manor House, how many of the issues in our downtown core, or that footprint, if you will, how many of those issues emanate out of people who would call the well home, would you say?
That's a tough one, sir. I used the Manor House on purpose. I didn't use the well on purpose because I didn't want it to look like we were picking on the well. I think the Manor House is a way nobody pays as much attention to the Manor House. So I thought that would be a good snapshot. That's a real tough one, sir. But the best way I can answer that is ride down Gloucester Street after 6 o'clock in the evening. You'll get your answer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that ugly. Don't take me wrong.
Yeah.
But anybody that rides down Gloucester Street or Norwich Street or goes to Mary Ross Park after sunset, ride by City Hall, you'll have your answer.
Yes, sir. The other question is, I want to wrap this in as I said, other nuisance properties that are core to our neighborhood. I know Mr. Milburn felt as if he had also watched the individual who attacked him come from abandoned homes across the street over there by the I think it's an old car mechanic spot that's for sale. There are 2 to 3 vacant homes that are right there next to that old car mechanic space, and he felt that he would see that person go in and out. As your police kind of respond to those vacant homes, when you get a response to maybe a vacant home or something that would be a nuisance property, do you all go through the process of not only seeing if someone is in there, but clearing that property out of people? Or do you all kind of go, let me see if the situation that we've been called for is here, and if it's not, we kind of leave it alone and move on? Or how do you all look at that issue?
We clear them out every time, sir. the gentleman that attacked him was staying at Monk, and abandoned house in Monk or either at Lee Street is where we found his property at. Now, he's known to shift around. He'd been at the well some, then I think he was sleeping, I don't know where else, until Monk and Lee Street, but that's where his property was at when he attacked the gentleman. But every time we find someone in an abandoned house, if we get a call, or we do it a lot in with new trainees, when we have trainees riding with FTOs at night, when there's downtime, we'll take them to abandoned houses. Okay, we're fixing to clear this house to teach them techniques. So we're serving two purposes there. We're teaching the officer and we're clearing homeless out of abandoned houses during downtime.
Because I think it's, you have your big gathering places, but also I want to focus on those little smaller properties that are really insular to our community to make sure we're going to clean them up. We're going to clean all of that up too. The next question that I have is maybe a little harder to think about. When talking to Mr. Milburn, it had come to his attention that the individual who attacked him had been arrested upwards of 40 times. And I don't know how many of those arrests have been here locally, whether Brunswick or county. But it raises two questions in my mind. One, I've heard consistently, and I think in defense, if I could, of the well, that oftentimes, Wright is receiving people being dropped off, whether by the hospital or those who may be getting out of jail and say, the well is either where I want to go or my residence. And so they are also having incoming, right? I guess the couple questions I have is, we asked the county chief as well as the sheriff to send someone this evening. We understand that they're stretched thin, so they didn't have anybody, but maybe some questions we could give to you to formally take to them. I would love to know when someone is exiting, our jail system here, and they are saying the well, or they are saying any other place that's not a permanent residence, are they really being dropped off there? And is that the best way we should be doing that? Or should there be some sort of, wording that says we can't drop you off at a temporary shelter? We need to know where your home's going to be.
The answer to that question, sir, the sheriff's office they don't take people that get out of jail and drop them off usually. Okay, if they get out of jail here in Glenn County, if they don't have somebody to pick them up, the SO closes the door behind them and they're on their own. Now, a lot of times they're asked to list a location where they're going, particularly if they're released from the state, parole, probation, something like that. They have to give an address. That would be more of the case of what's happening instead of our sheriff's office taking people and dropping them off at the well. That doesn't, I won't say it never, ever happens. That's not their usual operating procedure.
And what have you heard about maybe medical facilities, hospital and whatnot, maybe, tapping out from you maybe been in an emergency room for a while. We've tried to service you as much as we can. Have we had instances where we've had pickups from there and they've used the well as their primary place to be dropped off?
I've not heard of that, sir. They do have services here in the city and county that transport medical patients. I'm not sure if any's been dropped off. Now, I have heard about homeless going to the hospital and going in the ER, checking themselves in for a complaint of whatever, asking for food and water, whatever else. And then as soon as they get it, they walk out of the ER.
Okay.
And that's becoming more of an occurrence more and more lately, from what I understand. And that's homeless doing that.
The last question that I have is hearing that the individual who attacked Mr. Milburn was arrested more than 40 times. And at least we would say, maybe, I'm not sure, I would probably say maybe 10 have at least happened in the local area, whether county or city or adjacent. Is there anything that we can do? Because this is according, when I've had conversations with him, he has a history of other violent attacks in the area. And so he was not only known in the area, but also known as maybe someone who had a propensity for violence. And this is just a broad-based question. Is there anything that we can do to internally, whether with the police department, identify those individuals so when they are arrested or whatnot, that they are at least that notion is put before the court, that notion is put before how long they should be jailed, that notion is put before the justice system in a way where we are communicating as a community that this is a repeat offender. And at the same time, if we are seeing that repeat offender who has a propensity of violence showing up to facilities that we need to have a conversation with security officers, then what do we do? So I know that is a broad-based question. I'm hoping I'm not stepping on any toes, legal space, but I just wanted to put that question to you.
Yes, sir. The short answer to that is for the police, when we respond, we can flag a person, our 911 dispatchers will, if they fought police officers before, then that'll be flagged. The 911 dispatcher will alert the officer. That's the initial response. Longer term answer to your question is something that Ms. McDuffie has advocated, is getting mental health services and responders on the street with us. That's something that we've looked into. We've talked to other agencies that do that in other cities. And that's something that we're trying to figure out how to incorporate to have mental health people respond with us. This gentleman here, I didn't look at his criminal history. I know he had a long rap sheet. We've had some involvement with him here in the city. But how do we solve that problem is him day to day, there's really nothing we can do until we respond. And we know that he has mental issues. He was called the Moss Man. That was his street name because he always carried moss. I don't know why. But to have a mental health responder with us, like Ms. McDuffie's advocating, to intervene instead of us, the police, dealing with the problem of him spitting on the sidewalk or throwing a rock at a window. The mental health person can see that there's an issue there to put him on a track to get him the medicine he needs, the help he needs, the counseling he needs. So he's no longer a call for the police just to show up at every other day. So that's a very good path to go down. And I hope that's something that the city can help facilitate and get on the street with us to help solve some of these issues.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to be real brief because it's getting long and we still haven't had our commission meeting yet, but we had a very encouraging meeting today with the Brunswick homeless work group. And that was at the Pate building today. And our city manager was there, county administrator was there, several other nonprofit groups were there as well. And I think the thing that was so encouraging for us, we had the Chatham Savannah Homeless Authority coordinator. I'm sure she has a more illustrious position, but she is sort of the umbrella, the peak of the umbrella of their services within their community that service the homeless and preventing homelessness. And so under that umbrella of services, they have a lot of nonprofits and different groups that all coordinate together. They have a universal intake program and intake system so that once somebody's name goes in and information is captured, anybody else can know what that person has gone through, what track they're trying to head down. You know, one thing she did say, and we're going to go up and visit them the 28th of this month too. So we're looking forward to that. But one thing that she did say is even when if you had enough beds for people to shelter in, they won't necessarily go there. So that's not the solution. However, one thing that she did point out was, you know, these folks want the same thing you do. They want the dignity of having a home and a place they call their own. So they're doing some tiny houses too, a veterans tiny house village. They've got some other things going on. So the long and the short of that is I think they have a model that we're looking towards and will hopefully glean some great steps and some coordinated efforts that will hopefully make an effect within our community. Is there anything, Regina, that you wanted Ms. McDuffie to add to that?
The only thing I would say is that, you know, we have a lot of different things as we spoke about today. It's such a multifaceted problem with homelessness, but we have a lot of different things that are being looked at, being done. We even talked about some things that Savannah didn't have, such as what you all are talking about, developing a diversion process so that when people are brought in the community, we have a action plan to get them back to where they came from or to somewhere that is more, you know, I guess, comfortable for them, closer to their home. And we do have, you know, a lot of different things that are working right now, but we also have a lot of different things that need to be addressed. I think the biggest one for me, or, you know, that I realize that we don't have resources is the mental health problem, and one that needs to be, you know, is very impactful and needs to be specifically addressed for this community. But thank you.
Yes, sir.
We worked real hard and we enacted a no camping ordinance. What has been the result of the no camping ordinance?
The first part of the charge someone with no camping is we have to give them a warning first. So we've not charged anyone, to my knowledge, with camping. We give them the warning, they move on, but what do they do when we move them on? They walk down the street 2 blocks and sit up in the bushes there. So we shuffle them around, sir, and we could have charged them before we redid the camping ordinance at the end of last year, but charging the homeless, putting them in jail is not the answer. So basically, we just end up shuffling them from spot to spot because they're going to sleep somewhere, they're going to rest somewhere. We shuffle them from spot to spot.
Thank you. I think that everybody here needed to hear that. We have tried different things. You and I talked about that before we enacted it, but we had to do something. We did something. So the answer is up here, and it's getting everybody involved. It really is. And it's not a Brunswick. It's a St. Simon's, it's a Sea Island, it's a Jekyll Island, it's everybody in this community has got to come together and help to solve the problem. And take care of the people that have the needs. There's not a person sitting out there. There's not a person on the sidewalk. They're not hiding behind trees. They're not in the bushes. They're out. Most of them are visible. And they're screaming that they need more help from this community, not less help. So, and again, it's not all the city commission can do everything we can. My reason in doing this is letting you folks know that we did try to do something, but the answers lie with all of us. They're not there with us passing a law or us enforcing the law. The way we could be very effective, you know, but this is humanity we're talking about. And I know everybody in this room, you dig down deep, just like we do. I'm sitting up here shaking right now. I literally am from being and knowing that there are people out there that need help and we don't have the answers for them, but we're going to find the answers. We'll find them. And if you don't think I'm shaking, I'll be happy to raise my hands and let you see. It's an emotional thing with me. It really is. And every time I go by and I see the people out there in masses, I know that they won't help. And that's what we've got to figure out how to get it for them. Get the help. Thank you again.
Chief, is there a way you can describe what calls should be made to 911 versus non-emergency? Because I'm looking at a past police report from just someone calling the police because there was a homeless person in the middle of the road screaming. So if that would have been me, that would have saw the person, I probably wouldn't have called 911. I'll just call the non-emergency. So can we just tell the public what are 911 calls and what are non-emergency calls?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. 911 is when you need to holler help or you hear someone else hollering help. That's when you dial 911. Non-emergency is someone, a homeless person on the street begging for money or throwing rocks at somebody or kicking cans down the road, whatever. But that number is non-emergency. They both go to dispatch, but the non-emergency number is 912-554-3645. That's non-emergency. 911 is for help. If you call just for a homeless person on the road cursing at someone, you call 911 for that. They're going to ask you to call back on the non-emergency number because we need to keep that 911 line freed up for people that need help. So 911 is someone screaming help or you screaming help. That's when you call 911.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you all so much for your testimony tonight, and we will definitely be in touch with our findings as we continue to work on it. So thank you all so much. If you are from the general public and would like to be a part of any of the homelessness committees that have been being worked on, please make sure that you email us at the city, or you can come give your name to Mr. Devani, and we'll be sure to be in touch with you on the committees that are available. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to two appointments, an appointment to the Housing Authority of Commissioner Alan Booker and an appointment to the Convention and Visitors Bureau of Mr. Brad Piazza, and Mr. Brad Piazza is a reappointment. We will move on to number 6, items to consider for approval. Consider approval of March 1st, 2023 regularly scheduled minutes. We'll open it for a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the regular minutes from March the 1st meeting.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by a sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll now move on to consider approval of financial reports as of January 31st, 2022. Director Mills.
Yes, I'm presenting from home because I have a bad throat. You do have before you the January 31st financials for this is for 7 months of the current fiscal year. Year to date, we have revenues over expenditures of $3.7 million. Cash balances of $10.7 million in the general fund. We have lost revenues up 8.71% for the month of January and up 8.97% for year to date. That year to date number of 8.97% equates to $446,000 of an increase from the prior year. On the next page, we have SPLOST 6. We have a balance of $2.3 million cash on hand. No major changes. We are just winding down and paying out projects that are still to be completed. SPLOST 5, we still have $1.4 million that's set aside for a ladder truck. The Norwich Street Commons Fund has had no activity for the year other than earning interest on the balance, which is $343,000 as of January 31st. The Roosevelt Harris Center, you'll see we have revenues of $269,000, expenditures $237,000, which leaves us with a cash balance as of January 31st of $1,300. $160,000 of the income that we're showing our inflows is money that's been transferred over from the general fund. The ARPA fund has, if you look at the middle of the page or at the middle of that section, we have a cash balance as of January 31st of $7.5 million approximately. And you can see right above that disbursements on things we have actually spent funds for. And then under allocations, things that we have scheduled to use those funds for. Some of those monies under the allocations have already been used. The sanitation fund, the next page, we have operating income of $1.1 million, total cash on hand of $813,000 with $195,000 in Prime South restricted for the landfill. Trash pickup for the month, $128,000. You'll see year to date, $896,000. Those numbers remain fairly constant from one month to the next. It's usually around 128, 129,000 for the trash pickup each month. Stormwater utility, total inflows $1.2 million, outflows $1 million. We have a cash balance in that fund of $607,000 as of January 31st. Additional information, for the month of January, we had approximately $12,000 in traffic control expenses and aquatics, 1,502. I think you'll see year to date, the traffic control was 32,000. Those funds were funds that had to be spent on walkways. Those are some very expensive lights there that all three of them had to be replaced around the same time. The last page is the Roosevelt Lawrence Center. You see total expenditures for the month, $9,692. Total year to date, $79,000. Those run pretty much the same from one month to the next. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those for you.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll open it for a motion.
Motion to accept the financial statements as presented.
Hearing
Second.
a first and a second, all those in favor, show by the usual sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll now move on to item 9, consider approval of revision to the substantial amendment for Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act funds and to reallocate Community Development Block Grant COVID-3 CDBG CV $3. Director Bravo.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Major. I appreciate the time. And the reason why I'm here today is because I'm trying to process an amendment which it's going to move funds from the CDBG CV3 from one project or one activity, I should say, into another. The city was given $148,000 under the CDBG CV3. The previous director allocated that money for small businesses. But turns out to be that during the pandemic, the federal government really provided a lot of grants to the small businesses, to the PPA program. And there were some other 2 or 3 additional programs that the federal government provided for small businesses. So at that point, we spent pretty much all the money allocated for CDBG CV1, and we provided assistance to schools, some churches, cleaning supplies, food, shelter. We really did a great job providing that to the community. So we were left with the money for the small grants. So after, talking to city manager and having some meetings, we realized that the youth center, which is located on 1106 H Street, it requires new floors. The floors are, I'm going to say, probably about 50 years old, if not even more. The center provides not only a place for children, but also provides a space for social gatherings. In the past, people used to get married there. There was dancing going on. I mean, there was all kinds of activities that the center was being used for. Unfortunately, at this point, it's not being used for that purpose due to the fact that the floors are not up to code, that are not up to standard, and it creates a liability for the city. The center right now currently serves about 35 children with after-school programs. And during the summer, it serves about 150 children with summer programs. And basically, we truly use the space for children. Now, the funds obviously need to be used for low income, and that's what we're doing right now. The children that are being served in that center, they're all low income, and they're the ages between 4 and 12. We basically did our footwork and our work with my department. We set up a public hearing, which was yesterday. We also provided some social media. We reach out to over 165 stakeholders in the city. Provided a link for the meeting, and we basically also put a newspaper ad informing the community. So we use different outlets to communicate to the community of Brunswick that, hey, we're gonna move this money from one pot into another, the reasons why we're doing it, and what is the purpose of using that money for. So yesterday we had the meeting, and there were some questions that we addressed. Some of the questions was the infrastructure as a building, if it's something that truly is firm, is as strong as steel after so many years. We did have the engineers, the city engineers look at the building today, and basically they did a full assessment, and the building, it is safe, it is up to standards. The structure itself, the roof is also up to standards. There is no water leakage anywhere as far as the inside of the building. So at this point, we basically know that replacing the floors is not money wasted. It's going to be used for the right purpose. There was also some questions as far as using the center as a shelter. And indeed, yes, part of the CDBG CV is basically you have to use the money for future pandemics. And I think the center provides the space for either shelter. Hopefully, we will never have to see another pandemic, but it could be used for quarantine. It could be used for a vaccination center. So there's multi-purposes here that the center can be used. And I think that's one of the great advantages of having that center. We address also some issues as far as the center being flooded. As you all know, Brunswick sits on water. So the question is not if it's flooded, it's when it's going to get flooded. Talking to the coordinator there, Mr. Langston, he's been there for 15 years. He doesn't recall the place ever being flooded. I haven't recalled the place being flooded. I do know that in the past hurricane that obviously didn't happen, it didn't go through the city. The Red Cross set up a camp in the Raisley Center, and that place is only a block away from the youth center. So you can see how that place can be used also for sheltering. So the center actually meets that criteria. It can be used for different purposes. So we addressed pretty much all the questions that the public had during that public hearing. Other than that, what we're moving is basically $76,530 from the small business grants into the pot for the youth center. The amendment is basically for that purpose. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them now.
Thank you, Director Bravo. Any questions from the commission?
Can the money only be used for floors for that building?
I'm sorry?
Can it only be used for redoing the floors? What about bathrooms or anything?
Basically what we're doing, and forgive me for that, I can explain. We're going to change all the floors in the gym, the hallway. We have a kitchen. There's an area there that is next to the kitchen. We're going to do that. And the whole front of the building also is going to come out. So it's about 11,000 square feet of flooring that we're going to replace, including high traffic areas and obviously the gym. Which is the main area that we like to do the upgrade. That is going to include the funding, includes also the demo part, and also the new flooring, including the labor.
When do you expect to start this project?
I'm sorry?
When do you expect to start the project?
If it gets approved today, probably tomorrow, I'm going to start setting up the appointments to start doing the demo. The center will be closed during spring break, which is 1 week. If things go well and the contractors are willing to work with us, the plan is to do 3 days in demo and then hopefully 4 days on the floors. So
Long term.
that is correct. Yep.
Director, I want to say thank you for you all his work on this. I know Commissioner Harris and Commissioner Roll have worked continuously on ensuring that we get some things redone at 8th Street. It's been something that I've been focused on when we start thinking about rec programs and a myriad of buildings and things that the city owns. We've put dollars into Roosevelt Harris, the senior center. So we want to make sure that we also are upgrading all of our facilities across the board. So appreciate the work that you all have done on staff to make sure that you're pushing us and keeping us moving in that direction. Commissioner Roll, I hear you when you ask about the floors and other things, but I would hope that this is just the first phase of upgrades to continue to come to not only this facility, but others throughout the city. So with that, with no other question, I'll open it up for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the substantial amendment to fiscal year 2019 CARES Act plan to include CBDG CV3 and authorize the mayor to execute all documents related to CDBG CV3 funding.
Here in the first, hold on, we have one quick question before we.
I know it's been a while since I've been in that center.
Mhm.
But it has some classrooms or some gathering rooms separate from the main gym area.
Mhm.
Are those gonna get new? covering as
Yes,
well?
the ones that are, there is one that is not, there is carpeted. That one will remain the same. Everything else from that hallway to all the way to the kitchen will be replaced.
Perfect, thank you. I'll second.
Here in the first and the second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
you.
Thank you.
There is money to take care of that building there.
Yes, sir.
I think that's 50,000.
We'll now move to number 10, consider approval of resolution 2023-07 to commit funds as a local match to Federal Metropolitan Planning Fund grant for the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Director Alvarez.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Y'all are all familiar with the BATS group, the Brunswick Area Transportation Study. That is the local metropolitan planning organization that we participate in with the Glenn County. And that MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, allows us to take advantage of federal and state funding that's available to local MPOs. But one of the requirements is that we update certain documents on a regular basis. One of those, the primary document that has to be updated is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It's updated on a 5-year basis, and it's basically a long-range outlook, a 25-year outlook for the transportation needs of the city and county and the area. We are required by the Georgia Association of Metropolitan Organizations to keep that document updated to be able to take advantage of this of the available funding. So that's what this item is. It's time to update that plan. This is a resolution for us to commit funding to the update of that plan. Typically, these projects are 80% federally funded and 20% locally funded. In the case of this one, the estimated cost is $250,000. The 20% of that works out to the $50,000, which we would split evenly between us and Glenn County, giving us a cost of $25,000, which would be paid, budgeted from our general fund funds in this coming budget year. So that's this item is the approval of that resolution for that funding commitment.
Any questions from the commission?
The only comment I have, and I'm on the policy committee, and Ms. McDuffie usually attends our meetings as well. It's just the discussion that we want to make sure that the split between the county and the city is more aptly divided based on our loss negotiations, and that's sort of a split, because we by no means have all the roadway,
Right.
nor half of the roadway.
Right. That's
So-
definitely something to keep in mind
Yeah.
going forward.
And I mean, I had no idea that we had that option. I just sort of figured it was handed down that way, and that's the way it was, but apparently not.
Right, it's negotiable, and
Yeah.
I think this one just kind of slipped through, and the county has already committed their side of the funding, and in fact, this application has already been submitted
Right.
to the GAMPO group, so we did miss that opportunity on this one, but it's certainly something to keep in mind as we go forward for these things.
I would say anytime there's a match that we split with the county, we need to
I agree.
do that. So I wanted to just, I'm saying that just to make sure that we do that.
Certainly.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's really good. Any other questions or concerns? Hearing none, we'll open it for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 2023-07 to commit funds as a local match to the Federal Metropolitan Planning Fund grant for the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second? Hearing the first and a second, all those in favor show by a sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. We will now move on to number 11, consider approval of resolution 2023-08. Commit funds as a local match to Federal Metropolitan Planning Fund grant for the 2023 freight plan.
This is very much a similar document, similar item. The freight plan is sort of a plan that goes along, accompanies the mainland or the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It's a plan that kind of digs down into the freight habits and the freight movement through the city and the county, through the Ports Authority right here and our roadways and how freight is moved in and out of the city and the area. Would help us plan long term for larger scale roadways and that kind of thing for the movement of that freight. It will work the same way as the 80-20 funding. We'll be responsible for the 20% split evenly with Glenn County. I brought the wrong packet, so I don't have that exact number. I believe it's $21,638 maybe.
You've got 21,800.
Okay,
Yeah.
close, but same thing. That would be resolution number 2023-08 to approve the funding for the production of the freight plan through the BATS group.
Is that done every 5 years too?
No, ma'am. No,
Now,
ma'am.
when was-
This is the first time since I've been involved that we've done a freight plan.
I
So
don't, I mean, I've been on bats for 11 years and I don't remember doing that before.
it's, I don't know that I don't understand there's a periodic requirement there for it. This time around, I think it's strongly encouraged by the federal, the FHWA, that we complete this and kind of help us understand with the port expansion and things like that, help us to understand that movement and how the roadways and travel ways are going to work kind of in conjunction with that.
Okay, thank you.
Does it have anything to, or is this, plan incorporating the weight change of the, freight that's coming in? So is that a reasoning why they may be now reassessing this? Because, legislation has just changed, for the, freight size. I think it was from 80,000 pounds to 88 or somewhere in that figure. So is this something to incorporate those changes that have now gone through legislation?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sure that it will definitely take into account those changes and how that will affect roadways size and construction and that kind of thing, and how those roadways are put together.
So, and how we should look at this as an assessment as to how, or how the state's gonna look at it as to what we'll receive for the wear and tear for the taxation of these vehicles.
Yes, ma'am. I think it can serve as a basis for that as to, how detrimental that can be to our roadways and that kind of thing, and use it as a funding basis for rebuilding and reconstruction of those roadways as needed.
Yeah, they're gonna have to definitely do that, because you don't added another 8,000 pounds to a vehicle traveling on a roadway really that's not even built for 80,000.
That's a lot of weight. It sure is. It will make a difference.
Well, and I think too, over that same time period, they, you know, now, or for many years now, have piggybacked the containers, so. Yeah, we needed that, but you know, certainly if it's a state route or anything more major, it doesn't fall on us to those
Right.
costs, but it for ancillary.
And but somehow those trucks find their ways in our intra-city roadways, because I followed one the other day. Just to see why he wound up going through a neighborhood.
Yeah, they do.
Mhm.
They do. Yeah, sometimes they get off track for whatever reason and yeah, we end up with them on city streets sometimes. That's true.
Is this an opportunity to address the detour of freight trucks now that come down Bay and then cut over Prince and then go down Newcastle?
Yep.
Possibly. We can certainly
I think that's a long-term.
bring that to this consultants and get some language included in there.
Because they get going pretty darn fast, and sometimes, especially if they're coming into town, they don't turn and they come busting up trees and.
I think that's definitely something worth looking at in this document.
You know, we've got FedEx now delivering to neighborhoods in semi-tractor trailer trucks. They're down Riverside Drive a good bit now. I don't know how they gonna negotiate it. Yeah, FedEx.
Contact needs to be made with FedEx.
Any additional questions? Hearing none, we'll open it for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution 2023-08 to commit funds in the amount of 21,800 as a local match to the Federal Metropolitan Planning Grant Fund Grant for 2023 freight plan.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by the sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Director. We'll now move on to consider approval of resolution 2023-09, renaming and establishing guidelines for the newly created cemetery located adjacent to the historic Oak Grove Cemetery. City Manager McDuffie.
Thank you. This resolution is basically, and it says newly created, however, the plat was done in 2011 to identify 282 lots on the acre of land adjacent to the historic Oak Grove Cemetery. However, a distinction and designation for that area was never made. The Oak Grove Cemetery is historically designated and cannot be used as a new or sellable place. So that cemetery has to be contained as a historic area. Putting this additional cemetery next to it, we needed to kind of separate that from the historic area. So we are proposing to rename the new area as the Oak Grove Memorial Garden and sell those lots. They are already been advertised and sold over time. There's not been a lot of sales. I think it's only a couple of grave sites out there. But we wanted to go ahead and make that establishment of guidelines and naming of that area so that it can be distinctly separate from the Oak Grove cemetery. Money generated from this, of course, will go into the general fund for the upkeep and maintenance of the cemeteries, as has been done in the past.
It's
And there were-
1,000. Were you through?
Well, I was just going to say there was no real changes. I think in the first, the current procedures, it says that the lots are 4 by 12. But if you look at the plats that were done on that parcel plat that was originally done, the lots are 5 by 12. They are being sold for $1,000 each. They do not have the vertical headstones. Headstones must be placed on a stone, and those are things that the new cemetery has that would be different from the historic.
Does that cut down on maintenance?
Yes, because, basically it would be a flat area where they can cut around. It won't be areas designated such as they are in the Palmetto and Greenwood. Part of the maintenance there is that the city cuts around those areas, and within the area, if there's a lot of weeds, those areas are outside. So that's kind of how quiet out, sometimes doesn't look as well as it could.
Okay.
So this will allow for it to be flat and it to be cut. Those areas to be.
Great. I figured. Thank you.
Is this our standard charge for a lot, $1,000?
Well, that was what was established when that particular area was open. If you look at the current procedures, $600 is for the Palmetto and Greenwood, but the Oak Grove was established at $1,000.
Was there any thought for crematory urns? Or
I don't think that was specifically addressed. I guess they could be buried on a lot. But
okay. How that works.
I'd have to look at the current information and see if it addresses, but I don't recall that it addresses urns in that procedure.
Commissioner Harris, we said, usually they go vertical as opposed to horizontal.
When it's true.
When it's true.
Yeah.
That would.
I'll make the motion to approve the guidelines for the newly created Oak Grove Memorial Garden.
Commissioner Kasich, can, what, no one, you got one more?
No,
Oh, yeah, my question is, I think Commissioner Roll is hinting at it as well. Is the $1,000 set? Or is that what we are setting it as? Because I'm not anywhere near funerals or grave sites. I just do not understand what a normal price for one of those is. So I don't want to randomly set a number that isn't comparable to median income or something to that nature. And Commissioner Roll is saying Greenwood is 400.
Okay, so in the procedures that were set, and I'll have to go back and look when this was put in place. But it was already established. That was not something that was proposed in this particular document. Now, this is something that the commission approved, so it's up to you all if you want to change it. But I was going along with the current procedures that were already in place.
No, I appreciate that. I don't know what additional research I would do to figure out what median is. So $1,000 just seems like a lot to me. And so.
And on these procedures, Greenwood is not on here, and this is something I pulled from, documents that were already put in place, but Palmetto is set at $600 with the limit of 4 to a customer. Oak Grove is shown here as Oak Grove, but this is the Oak Grove Memorial Gardens at $1,000 and limit 4 to a customer. And from what we gleaned is that Greenwood, and I didn't know that it was lower, but they were only allowing 2 lots, and I don't know, I couldn't find any documentation for that, but we will have to upgrade our information here. So.
Can we use better price later?
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we set the price at a later time to be?
Certainly.
Okay. And I don't know how we put that forward in the motion. I would say Yeah.
Defer the whole thing?
Well, no, we don't have to defer it. We can accept the name and the spots.
Is this an emergency, Regina?
Oh, no, this was
This is
just,
not an emergency. It could be deferred.
Okay.
it was just
I'll
basic.
make a motion to defer it. Here you go.
Perfect. Here the first, do I hear second?
Second.
Here the first and second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Hearing that, the motion passes and the item is deferred, and I'll sit with someone and try and figure out median and where all of those prices are, so I can get it to the commission. And I've never done that before. I just didn't want us to price out citizens. With that, we'll move on to number 13, discussion of proposed homeless service ordinance, City Attorney Corey.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. What you have before you is what would be considered if we move forward from here, the first reading of a new ordinance for the city of Brunswick related to homelessness. It would address homeless shelters, homeless day shelters. It sets forth new definitions of homelessness services, homelessness services providers. And then it addresses where these types of, I don't want to call them businesses because I don't think they're businesses, but where these types of operations can be located within the city. It is important to note that at the moment it contemplates our new, what would be our new planning and zoning classifications. It does not contemplate what would be our new planning and zoning classification. So presently, if you looked, it does have page numbers. Thank goodness. All right. As you see, page 1 contains the definitions. Page 2 sets forth that a conditional use permit and license would be required. So while we're using planning and the zoning classifications to dictate where these types of facilities can be located in the city, even within that zoning classification, each type of facility would need to come before the city commission to seek out a conditional use. So while it's going to be a use that would be allowed in the zoning, it's going to be allowed with conditional use, and that would be a requirement under this ordinance. And then if you look further down under homeless shelter, you will see the classifications of planning zoning classifications that would be allowed GC, HC, or I districts with a conditional use. And then it sets forth conditions under which these facilities must operate to be considered for an appropriate location. So, it goes kind of through and then addresses homeless shelter, which contemplates overnight services, homeless day shelter, which is obviously not providing overnight services, the homelessness services provider, and then sets forth all the conditions that would be related to each of the facilities. I know I've sent this out. There has been comments provided by Reverend Culpepper. I know I've provided those to the commission. I believe yesterday, I think there was, or maybe Naomi sent them out to everyone this morning. I can't recall exactly. Those are the only comments I've had so far. So I did want to bring this forward to your attention. Obviously, it's a discussion item tonight. It can't be approved, but it's for the consideration of the commission.
What about transitional? Like, for instance, it's somebody who's working, they're employed, but they're in some sort of a shelter. Do we need to differentiate between?
I believe that would be captured within this. I mean, I think it matters. It would fall within whether or not it's in the homelessness services category. If you look at the definition, it means, these are services being provided for rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, educational, hygienic, job and job training programs. I think within that would be.
Do we need?
I guess it just depends. I'm not sure. I don't think we need to delve that far into those definitions. If they are, it would be dependent on where they are. I mean, it's hard to answer that question, I think.
Well, and I think that one of them did mention job training or something related to jobs. So, you know, if it's a temporary shelter with folks that would otherwise find themselves homeless, but they're gaining job support, et cetera, in hopes of going on beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and even under the homeless shelter definition, it contemplates, you know, a person being unhoused for a temporary time
Okay,
period.
yeah.
I mean, I think that would be where you might be looking at somebody that's transitory and of course, or has gone through some significant life event and needs to be, you know, just have that gap filled to be able to move to the next step.
So you have definitively defined homelessness versus unhoused.
I think unhoused would fall within the definition of homelessness, or excuse me, within the definition of homeless. I think that they go hand in hand. Because I do think you'd have to take into consideration chronically homeless as well as that person that's had that, you know, life event and is in a transition period where they just need the help to get through one and the other. They're taking advantage of all the services being provided with the full intent. They're going through the rehoming program, whatever is being offered at these facilities with the intent of getting back into some sort of permanent housing situation.
So it's a broad enough definition, I think, that captures a lot of what we're talking about.
I believe so. And I think it's, you know, it's going to be incumbent on the facilities to make that determination as people present seeking their services. I mean, I think they're going to go through and based on the groups we've talked to, they make, you know, lots of them have an intake process to make a determination as to whether or not, you know, they're an appropriate fit for the facility.
Just a couple questions. One, currently we have a moratorium, right?
That's correct.
So for us to be able to start to understand what this would mean to exist in our city in the way that we think would be applicable to us, we have to put some kind of policy in place to start to guide those decisions. Inside of it's funny because it trends with what a couple of our citizens, I think, talked to, we're having conversations with Commissioner Harris about, which was, you know, the thought that the commission somehow had say so over, you know, those who currently reside in the city. And so I guess a couple questions before this moment, was there a policy in place? And if not, are we now putting in policy a place that would have those services come before us so we could vet them and take a vote to move forward?
I think that is the intent of this ordinance. And, you know, from the city's perspective, we have planning and zoning powers. We don't have powers that extend beyond to making these determinations as to who's transitory, who's indigent, those types of things. We aren't providing those services necessarily, but there's a bit of a void in our ordinances as it is. That's why we passed the moratorium. The moratorium would expire upon the approval of an appropriate ordinance that would help govern this. So from, you know, my perspective, it was the question of how do we allow for facilities to operate within the city, within the confines of our planning and zoning powers. And I believe that this ordinance would allow that to go forward.
And I think one of the things that's most important to me that I see in here is it coming in front of us allows us to vet the programmatic outcomes, allows us to also vet the organization the same way we vet restaurants who may want to, you know, have an after hours facility, and we will ask them, are they going to have additional security? How are they thinking about those security interests? Those are additional questions that we can ask them as we vet that property or that owner as they come through the process.
I mean, I think that's, you know, part of the city's planning and zoning powers is to make sure that you don't have, for lack of a better example, a liquor store next to an elementary school.
Right.
You know, so you implement these types of ordinances to ensure that the uses are appropriate in the areas in which they're located.
And this counts as the first reading?
It does, yes.
Okay.
So subject to any revisions and there's additional, the city clerk will advertise. We have some public comments already, and then if there are additional ones, we certainly will contemplate those and to the bringing forth the second reading and any comments by the commission, of course. I'd welcome anything to.
So this, will the second reading be a public hearing as well? It'll just be a second.
No, it
reading
would
that
just
we
be, no, this isn't as,
can Further,
this is almost as if you're doing a new business classification.
okay.
Again, I don't really want to address it there. I don't consider them businesses. So, and we're not rezoning property. We're not, under the ZPL necessarily. Commission is well within its discretion if they wanted to have public hearing, of course, but it's not a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, one of the things that I know that some of the shelters provide is in inclement weather, cold storms, that sort of thing. They house overnight. And you're saying here that this is not, there's no mention of being able to do that here anywhere that I read.
Well, I mean, it's going to be based on what the services the facility would like to offer. If they are seeking out to be licensed as a homeless shelter, offering overnight services, that would be an allowable situation under this ordinance. And then they could certainly maintain. If they willingly submit as a day shelter, then they would not be able to offer overnight services.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Hearing none, do we have anything for executive session?
No.
Nope, nothing for executive session. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed the same. Hearing none. Motion passes. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.